Hey, how's it going?
How you doing?
Good. Ready to rock?
So could you please introduce yourself, just so the Spanish people get to know you a little?
Absolutely. So, my name is Brad COUILLARD. I've been powerlifting coaching since 2014-ish, give or take. So, kind of rough coaching there at the beginning. Not really taking on a lot, more so just learning. And then I took on that more full-time role in 2017, 2018, after leaving a project management career. Like I said, I've competed a few times. In that time frame, I had some injuries and things like that I dealt with. A couple surgeries I probably didn't need, but we did them anyway. So I've been in the game for quite a while. I've done referees, I've done meet directing, I've coached at the world level for 2 U.S. Junior and sub-junior teams as an assistant coach. I've been to pretty much every Arnold that you can think of, except for one when my daughter was born. Yeah, that's pretty much it. And just loving powerlifting ever since I've gotten into it, and don't ever see myself leaving.
Okay, got it. So the first question goes around the technique-wise.
Sure.
When and how do you think we should, as coaches, intervene in a movement? Like, when do you think you've seen enough of something going wrong and you have to just sit and talk? We gotta change some things.
Sure. So this is a topic that I think that I've evolved quite a bit on. Before I would be very direct, like, oh, we need to put our knees here, put our hips here. This is what we need to do. We need to stack. We need to brace. We need to do all these
But before
different...
you used to intervene more.
I would intervene a lot more. Yeah. And I think over time, you start to understand. And I think we've seen that paradigm shift in the last couple of years, ever since right around COVID. I think we saw more coaches kind of diving into this like idea of natural organization, right? So part of me as coaches and as athletes, we have to understand that exists, that there is going to be subconscious things that occur to help make the lift, quote unquote, easier, right? Because it's going to naturally, once you define the bar on the midfoot in a squat, right? You're going to want to return to a normal S curve of the spine when you lock out a deadlift. So if you're overly flexed, right, in your back, guess what's happening? You're going to eventually extend at the top to lock out, correct? Right? You're going to find that normal, right? S curve being cervical extension, thoracic flexion, lumbar extension, right? You're going to find that position. So if you look like a candy cane, right, you look like a big, humpback whale, right? At some point, you're going to end up standing up back into your normal curve. So there's things that exist naturally that if we try to fight that or resist it, right, through cueing or specific joint motions or ideas of movement, you're going to end up fighting yourself more than you're actually helping yourself. So, case in point, I think the idea of like stacking a pelvis and bracing a pelvis has probably gotten to the point where, oh, we need a flat lower back, right? That's what a lot of people think, right? When they're like, oh, I need a brace, I need to have a neutral lower back. And that's the reality of it is your neutrality or neutral is lumbar extension. To a degree, to some level of degree. Okay, so if you're trying to purposely tuck your pelvis and flatten your lower back out, guess what it's going to do? It's going to shove you right back into extension at some point. So the idea of basically my philosophy on stuff like that is I'm not going to probe too much into technique unless there's a systemic issue. And I don't typically find that to be anything more than sometimes just the lifter not understanding what they need to do, right? So for example, I'm trying to think of a good one. So, for example, okay, so a deadlifter, they go down to the bar and they start kind of wiggling around and kind of shimmying into position, and the bar starts moving, right? And the bar starts rolling around, right? And then they go to hip hike and wedge back in or whatever, and the bar bumps, right? Bar bumps and rolls away from them as they go to wedge in, right? Little things like that. That to me, like either they're too close to the bar or they don't create enough space between them and the bar to wedge in effectively. So there's two ways that I could approach that. I could tell them, hey, keep your legs straighter when you go down to the bar so that you can move your shins and wedge in. Or if you're going to hip hike, create a lot of space so that you can find your position into the bar. Or spend less time at the bar because you're clearly getting nervous and fidgety and it's causing you to move around too much, right? So for me, like those are not necessarily specific cues, but more so just setup issues, right? And a lot of times too, like I kind of think of I call them like vicious cycles, like movement cycles. So it's the idea of like, oh, you see someone driving their knees out in a squat and then they collapse. What does that lifter end up doing? They drive their knees out harder because they see their knees collapsing in their videos and they're worried about it, right? Or you see someone squatting and they stay really upright and they get knocked over halfway down through their squat. What do they end up doing? They try to be taller, right? Well, the reality of it is that bar is trying to push you down into the position it wants you to be in to be effective for you. Right, and efficient, right?
Yeah.
So if I'm sitting there forcing a position that it doesn't like and it keeps throwing me out of it, why do I keep repeating it? Right? Why would I drive my knees outward more if my knees want to be more inward and over my toes? Why do I keep doing it? Right? And that's more of like basically not trusting where they need to go, right? It's like resisting where they should be. So when it comes to movement coaching, I don't really get a whole lot involved unless it's like, hey, I just need you to make sure you're balanced on the midfoot, or watch the bar go up and down on the bench press. I don't need you to cue your elbows and shoulders and do all funny stuff. I need you to let the bar track, because at the end of the day, I genuinely believe that these lifters are athletes. And athletes don't worry about their movements a lot of the time, especially in the heat of the moment.
Yeah.
I don't need someone worried about where their knee tracks in a squat when they're trying to take their third attempt for a gold medal. Make that make sense. That doesn't track. Right? I need consistency, right? And then we can make adjustments on the day of, in terms of like how much weight on the bar, or okay, maybe you need a little bit more pressure in your midfoot, so shift your weight a little bit forward. Little things that aren't that mentally taxing for us to be able to execute effectively.
And
right?
maybe is that the reason why you feel more comfortable having like high frequencies and high volume training, like because you're giving them more space to practice.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's not bad.
I've seen Marcellus, for instance. His tertiary squats, I think, there was super, super, super light. Like, for some people here in Spain, it wouldn't be effective work, like load-wise.
Yeah.
But maybe because you're just simply giving them a space to reinforce those changes you want to make happen.
Sure, absolutely. I mean, I think too, you have a couple considerations there, right? You have movement tendencies, right? Everybody has a little bit of a movement tendency. If someone was always falling over in a squat, right, and they're always leaning a lot, right, and their torso, chest falls, they get into that position quite frequently, that tells me that they're using their posterior chain a lot. Correct, right? We can infer that the lower back, the glutes, the hamstrings, those are getting the bulk of their training from the squat, right? Do you think that in my opinion, and again, these are bias, and bias can always change depending on the lifter, because lifters don't fit bias all the time. But if that was the tendency, I'd probably think that that lifter couldn't handle a ton of deadlift volume, right? Because it's just taxing the same stuff over and over and over. Okay? Well, the deadlift doesn't have an eccentric, so it's taking a bit of more of a beating off the floor to get the set going, right? Versus a squat, which is I have an eccentric, I have control, and I can if I'm seeing that, I can also complement the squat with more quad work to help them be a little bit more squatty and take some pressure off of the posterior chain a little bit. So I might complement the squat with more hack squat or pendulum, but if you don't have that option, okay, maybe a high bar, maybe an SSB, and maybe a Bulgarian with your heel elevated to get more quad, whatever it may be, to help that individual squat a little bit more upright and take some pressure off, and in turn that saves the back for a little bit more work on the deadlift. Right? So there's little, like I look at movement tendencies from that standpoint to also guide my decision on, do I intervene? Do I just program around it, so to speak? Right? And like, for Marcellus's case with his squat training, he can handle, and this is something we figured out in the last 7 blocks, he was gaining weight, and we had a rough training session, and I just straight up asked him, like, do you feel fatigued? And the answer was, no, I feel fine, but I don't feel strong. Okay, so we're clearly not doing enough, but we had intensity on the table, and intensity wasn't the issue. So let's bump up your volume. And so in that case, that was helping him feel like he had more pop in his legs. So it doesn't necessarily mean that it needs to be ultra effective. It could be meaning for the fact that it's just giving you more consistency with the movement. It's giving you that like fullness in your muscles that you can feel like you can go and kind of pop and feel snappy with the lift. And that also depends on timing too. Like potentially I could take his same structure with the same amount of volume and condense it to 2 days, but make the exposure differences closer together. Right? I think there's a variety of combinations that you could try, given off of those principles that that you learn for each lifter. Again, it's different for everybody. I hate the "it depends" part, but you have bias that you can start with, and then you can apply it, and then you can learn based on the feedback of how they're performing. So I have lifters, and I'll say, I straight up be like, this isn't working. They'll be like, oh no, it feels pretty good. And I'm like, no, it's not. I can tell you that your speed is not where I want it. It's not where it should be. This isn't working. We're changing something.
So for you, speed is relevant?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, I think the same.
If you're looking at a weight and you go, okay, you squatted 270, right? And they're taking a moderate single at like, I don't know, 230, 240, right? And you're like, okay, this should move pretty well, right? If we're on, right? If we're in a good spot, this should move pretty well. And I'm looking at it and it's like, I don't know, 7.5, 8 RPE. That's a red flag. We're changing something. This isn't working. Like, and then I'll ask feedback questions to see if I can dive deeper into potentially an issue that we can tweak, right, or we can change. Or I'll go, if this is the same trend that I've seen week after week for a few weeks, I'll be like, we need to change something. I told a lifter the other day, I said, this isn't working. We're going to probably change after this block.
I found this problem with like secondary and tertiary sessions because it's hard to tell them, but most of the times I know they are not moving the bar as fast as they can. And the RPE could be okay, but I know it could have moved faster. And long term, I think that's what keeps your progress pushing. That's secondary and tertiary work, because the primary, we all know about the primaries. We all know how they work.
Yeah.
But I struggle a lot with making them understand how important it is to move the bar fast every day.
So it is hard, because you have a couple things that I tend to find with secondary and tertiary days. Tertiary usually has some level of, if you're doing let's say a 3 times a week squat or 3 times a week bench, and you have secondary, tertiary, primary. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of times I'll find that tertiary day feels like crap.
Mm-hmm.
And that is okay, because more often than not, it's dealing with some level of fatigue that is kind of bridging the gap between the secondary and primary. Okay. It's the same thing with the squat. Okay. And so secondary will feel, decent. The primer or the tertiary will feel, decent, and then the primary will show up. But then you come back around to your secondary day, right? And some lifters I found with like a 3 times a week squats setup, they actually might find that over time the secondary day feels better. For example, let's say we have a week that starts Monday, Wednesday, Friday.
Yeah.
Okay. So squat secondary on Monday, tertiary on Wednesday, and a primary on Friday. So what ends up happening is you get like accumulation of fatigue, right, throughout the week from all 3 days, and then they get that extra rest day at the end, and then all of a sudden their secondary day starts feeling better, right? Because now you have a 72-hour rebound from that heavy exposure and the volume on the primary that carries you into the secondary.
Yeah.
And so all of a sudden the secondary feels good. I've had it the other way around, where I have a 2x a week squat, where it might be like a Monday and a Thursday. Okay, so 72 hours, again, that's kind of like my starting point, so to speak, if I'm going to do 2x a week, is Monday and a Thursday, so 72 hours. I might find that their secondary day feels like crap, because now I have 96 hours into that secondary day.
That's too much.
And they get detrained. Yep, it's too much. And I'll use this example, and this can be applied to pretty much, I feel it in a lot of different exercises. But let's say you go and you have an accessory work, like a cable row. Okay? You go do your cable row, and you're like, man, it feels really heavy today. Why does it feel so heavy? And you do a set. Okay? And let's say you shifted the week around, what have you, or maybe you haven't done it in a while. Okay? And you do that first set and it feels like crap. Do it again, the same weight. And I would probably put money on the fact that if you do it again, you'll feel a lot better. Mm-hmm. Because more often than not, it needs that little illicit priming effect that it needs to feel good again, because you haven't done it well enough or frequent enough to feel like it's consistent.
That's why we all are, most of all, are using primers for bench. Like prior to primary session, we have a primer, or even the day of the primary bench, we have a primer inside the protocol, because we get that feeling, that punch, that speed wise, we get the speed before the top protocol.
Absolutely. I mean, Marcellus's training is like that right now, and I've got it for a few other people. Is like they're doing like 2 and 3 singles of their top single for bench.
Yeah, I've seen it.
Guess which one feels the best?
The third.
Yeah. Second and third ones are always better. Yeah.
I'm trying now. Those 3 singles, for example, I'm trying now with girls first.
Yep.
Because I tend to try everything first with girls. Sure. I don't know why. They feel a little bit more predictable, I think.
Okay.
I don't know.
Makes sense. Hey. Yeah.
And yes, I'm like that.
And the third one's better.
Yeah, always.
Yep.
And that's a way they can learn about fatigue, and they can remove this fear of this idea of if I overshoot my top set, the whole workout is fucked up. Like you have more in the tank than you believe.
I think we owe it to ourselves to know that we are capable of more than we think. In a way that I think that with the top set back down structure, or the top set structure, and, week 4 mentalities and things like that. I think it comes with an understanding that it's okay to not always be at your peak, but you can be close and still get multiple exposures and things like that. Now, granted, again, it depends. Some lifters just can't do it.
It depends.
They just can't. I've got lifters that if you give them more than 2 top sets of squat a week, they can't tolerate it, and even then, it boils down to maybe 1 top set a week, and they're doing ascending work or something like that on the other day. So it's not as binary as that, but I think with specifically the bench, we can tolerate more than 1 single on some of those weights. And I think it just gives more practice, it gives more confidence, and I think at the same time it kind of goes into the idea that, maybe smaller jumps are needed from seconds to thirds where they can kind of feel it out and then have that little bit of priming effect. I mean, again, this is all conjecture, more theory than anything at this point, but it's showing me that having multiple singles on the bench really does kind of create a faster performance as the seconds and third singles show up. Yeah. It doesn't work as well on squat, and it does not work very well on deadlift. I'll say that.
That's why maybe ascending sets work almost for everybody. Like if you're targeting them right, load-wise and volume-wise, it is too difficult for them not to work.
Yeah. Oh, I would absolutely agree. So I mean that's in terms of kind of circling back with movement and things like that. I mean, it's again I want to be able to understand how they move, how they respond, and that's where I'll kind of circling to the idea that you can program around the movement. You don't necessarily need to change the movement.
Yeah, I think so too.
Right. So sometimes
the best intervention technique wise is some programming change, which allows them to practice more.
Well, I mean, it kind of circles back to the videos that Steve and I have done with regarding what is good technique. Like, how much better can it get?
Yeah.
Right. Look at the different high level lifters and what they're doing in terms of positions. Right. If you were to take a textbook squat position and picture, who would you envision? Right? I think there's a handful that kind of stand out to me, but at that same time, then you have other lifters that are moving just as much weight, and you're like, how are they doing that? Right? So it's like, what would you consider a clean bench? Is it a soft touch or is it a sink? Right? Because we've seen lifters bench very well with the soft touch, and then you have guys like Keiko who can sink it and press the world. I don't think that there is ultimately a exact science of what it should look like. More so in a sense of these lifters are coming to us as coaches, whether it's completely green, they don't have any experience whatsoever, but even then they have a sense of their body has a sense of mobility, they have a sense of limitations, injury history, things like that influence the way that they move. So how much can we actually change with that? It's not really, unless we can change stance width, we can change the stance or the your foot angle, we can change the grip placement on the bar placement. Those are some of the things that we can typically change.
Even big changes like sinking or soft touching in the bench. When the IPF changed the rule for elbow depth, we were all worried about female benches, and they are the same or even better, and most of them have changed.
Yeah, and I think the select few that were close. Yeah, the select few that were close had to do a little maneuvering. I've had a lifter that had to change for bench depth, and it came down to reducing the arch as well as allowing for a little bit of sink. And even then, we still got called, albeit I felt like they were pretty similar to some of the other lifters in the same flight, but nonetheless, I'm not going to, there's not much I can do with that. And especially in the heat of the moment. And you have to kind of start calling around what numbers you should put on the bar to make lifts, right? Again, this is the idea of like a sense of consistency going into a competition, making sure that you're meeting the standard, you're doing all that stuff. That's good technique. And something that's ultimately the big ticket item, I think, for this is something that is consistent. Because if it is consistent for them, it's easier for us to program. It's easier for us to call attempts. It's easier for us to deal with the fatigue and deal with everything than it is for us to start creating a moving target of changing their technique around, right? And now I'm trying to change how they're loading their body, which is going to in turn potentially change how they need to program. And then on top of that, you're dealing with the lack of confidence, right? Right? Has anyone, like, pick any sport, pick anything, and someone challenges you on what you're doing, you start to lose that confidence on what you're doing. So you start to like double, second guess yourself.
I guess that comes sometimes with over cueing, which is a thing like novice coaches do a lot. And I do like you. I believe in natural organization, and I believe in cueing just as much as needed. Not because you can create this environment of doubts and lack of confidence, and you can't grow in an environment like that.
Absolutely. So I use this example a lot, but if I give my daughter a cup of water and I say, "Can you go take this to your mom?" Right? And I say, "Can you walk across the room, but don't spill." What does that do? What does "don't spill" do to her? You start now she's shaking and trying not to spill it, and the water spills. Correct? Right? It spills out. Versus, okay, just go take it to your mom. That is the idea of natural organization. Let her figure it out. She might spill a little bit. Who cares? But it might be far less than what she's doing with if she's sitting there hyper fixated on something.
Yeah.
Right? And the fear of not doing it correctly too, because I have athletes that are, fear of failure. Right? And now they're afraid that they're not going to do something correct or perfect. Right? And that's another this is something that Steve has told me a few years ago. He's like, programming and coaching at times, or coaching is psychology and physiology, right? It's the idea that you are also dealing with you're coaching a human being that has thoughts and feelings and things like that, emotions that can affect how effective something is for them, whether that be cueing or programming. Right? So if you're sitting there and someone is neurotic and they can't handle feedback very well, criticism very well, do you think giving them a bunch of cues is a smart idea? No. Because they're just going to get hung up on it, and then they're not going to be able to effectively execute. And now you're changing the level of consistency that you're going to get from their training, and it's going to impact then you're going to get all these weird data points when it comes to the programming. Like, why did this speed look really good this day, but not this day? Right? Is it a fatigue issue? No. More often than not, it's probably them just some days they're thinking more, some days they're thinking less, or what have you, and now you've changed the landscape, so to speak. Yeah. So technique should be a constant, right? Unless it backslides into something where you're like, what is going on here?
Yeah. Or not meeting the standards, of course.
Exactly. Then it's like, okay, well, what things do we need to change, right? And I'll look at good videos versus quote unquote bad videos, and I'll go look at them, because sometimes too it's not the technique. Sometimes it's how they're fatigued. Those 3x15 leg extensions that you're doing is probably making your quads really sore 48 hours before a back squat, a heavy squat session. So maybe they start getting a little bit more pitched over because they're sore. Right? And they might not realize it because maybe they're just used to doing it. Right? And it's like, okay, well, maybe I don't necessarily need to look at, I need to drive my knees more in a squat. No, not if their movement capacity is 80-20 rule. 80% of the time it's really good. 20% of the time it's a little off. I expect the movement to be a little off maybe on a secondary day where they feel a little detrained, or I maybe expect it on a tertiary day after doing a 3x8 on a ascending squat on a prime or a secondary day 48 hours beforehand. Yeah. I expect that.
That's something I struggle to with, like this idea that I have difficulties when I try to tell them you need fatigue. We need fatigue to produce performance. It is not about feeling great or feeling great every day. It's about escalating the mountain against fatigue and reaching the peak. It's not about feeling great on the primary, every primary. Yeah, it is what you said before, is getting closer to the peak, as close to the peak as we can.
Sure.
To the top end.
And it's always going to be, I think it's always going to have some level of like, Marcellus and I were talking about this for his prep, and it's kind of like the idea of like, we want you to be on a peak level of like, 260 squat, but we'd be content with a 255.
Yeah.
Right. And I think we live on ranges. And so like for bench for me is like that one that I really look at, because you see so many singles for most people. That is this single showing me that bigger number is there? If the answer is no, then I'm already 2.5 under. Okay, well, is that a meet PR or comp PR, or is it is it 2.5 under? Okay, cool. Well, that kind of gives me the gauge of, is this something I should be concerned about or not concerned about? And maybe that's just where they are in this phase of training, right? If it's on the high side, great, cool, awesome. We're moving the needle. But if it's not, what's going on and why? Right? Like I had a lifter that was doing really well and gives me a lot of positive feedback with his training. But I was watching his singles, and in my mind I had like this set number for him.
Yeah.
And he sends me a bench single, and I'm like, no, that's not it. It's not there. What happened to my 5 kilo PR on this bench? Where'd it go? I have 2, but I don't have my 5 that I was consistently showing. What happened? And so my theory is that all of the bench days were going up by 2.5, right? Nice and steady. And I think at a certain point, the intensity just started hitting him too hard.
Mm-hmm.
Like, not in a like overly fatiguing way. It's just like every day was kind of touching closer and closer to the same numbers, because eventually the primary hits a wall, right? Eventually it doesn't extend beyond that, and then the other days are sliding up behind it, so to speak. And so when they get close to each other to the point where it's like all intensity, then that's when I started seeing this issue. So I was like, all right, I'm going to drop the other days back a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so my running theory is that it will work, because I've seen this happen with a few other lifters, but I'm waiting to hear back for, let's say Friday. So yeah, I should hear back on tomorrow, see how their bench went.
So jumping up to the fourth question, regarding handling. I don't know if you know about this situation that came up in 2023 when Bob and Ashton were competing against each other. And they were both coached by Marcellus, and they were both handled by Marcellus that day.
Yes.
And I don't know if you've seen yourself in this situation. What do you think you would do now if you had a situation in which both are competing against each other, like number by number?
It's a conversation to have before you even get to the platform, before you even get to the day of. In my opinion, I think knowing, with like Bob and Ashton, they're very competitive, and I think they thrive on that challenge against each other, which was awesome. And I think that's why it worked. It was fine the way it was. I've been in a situation where that's happened before, and it was kind of like inadvertent. Like one lifter did really poorly, and one lifter did really well. Right, the one that was on the upper end was doing poorly, and the one on the bottom end or the lower in the strength phase or in that roster was doing better, and they kind of met in the middle, so to speak. And I've been in that situation, and I sat them both down. I said, "This is what's about to happen, right? This is what's going to happen." And I explained the situation, and it worked out fine, right? I explained, "Hey, this is what I'm not going to tell you numbers, or I'm not going to do play the game against each other. I'm going to put the best and final, the best numbers on the bar, and that's where it's going to land." Okay. And I've been in that situation again, and it turned out poorly.
Mm-hmm.
In the hindsight of it, I didn't explain the where people were placing. So, like from my experience, if I were ever to be caught in that position again, I'd explain, "Hey, this is your best and final is doing this. This best and final is doing that. This is your game now. This isn't my game. I'm here to be your, whatever." I would let them make their decision based off of that, right? I didn't do that in the moment because I was trying to keep everybody in as highly placed as possible without risk of going over. But again, that's me being in a position of still trying to coach a little to a degree, and that was a moment I was not prepared for.
Mm-hmm.
Essentially, because they were not close to one another. That being said, I had a situation not shortly after that time, where I basically called them both. Actually, there's three of them. They were all really close to each other. I said, "This is the reality of it." Two of them were in a daytime session, and one was in a prime time. I said, "Are you okay with me coaching the one in prime time? Because they're not competing against you at that point. Your totals are secured. Are you okay with that?" They said, "Yes." Cool. Okay, that one's off the table. That one's fine. The other two were neck and neck, so to speak, in the daytime session in the same flight. I said, "I will not coach either of you.
Mm-hmm.
So please contact someone or what have you, or I can make connections. Please find somebody to handle for you. Because I do not want to be associated with the numbers and the attempt calls and things like that and get myself into I tried to be as fair and unbiased as I possibly could. I'm your programming coach for all intents and purposes. And, we go from there. So
they understood?
They understood that. Yep. We talked weeks in advance. We had this all scheduled out weeks in advance. So long story short, long stories. I've been in the position of like 3 times now. 2 were kind of like snuck up on me, and we're kind of like into the deadlifts type situation. You go, uh-oh, this is not going the way it's wanted for this person. It's going great for this person. That happened twice. I did the conversation. I laid everything out. It went fine. And then I had another situation where I could have explained where they were in placing and let them take control a little bit more. And it turned out poorly. And that's something that I have to learn from. And that's why I will never put myself in that position again. If I feel like there's a hint of competition between them where, someone could do really well and someone could do poorly and they could get close to one another, I'm going to probably opt for 2 different coaches. Whether I contact people I know or they have somebody that handles them and I can run them through the structure and game plan and everything, and I'm going to take myself out of it, because that's the last thing I want to do is to be caught in the middle and make an athlete upset, right? I want them to have the best coaching and competition experience they can, and I don't want them to feel like they're, someone's getting chosen over one another. You know what I mean? Like, I don't want to put someone in that position.
Yeah.
That's not fair.
I think Matt Gary concluded the same in his video. He said maybe he would coach the person that first that first started with him, something like that. but that he would recommend to have 2 different handlers and to be removed out of the scene.
Yeah, I want to be out of the equation.
Yeah,
it's
to me better for everyone.
It's mentally easier. It's hard. Don't get me wrong. It's very,
hard,
very hard.
I guess, yeah.
But it's the right. At least in my experience, that's my feeling on what I would do. Again, I think it also depends on how the lifters feel about it and what if they're okay with it. That again, it's a conversation to say, hey, look, here's the scenario. What would you like from me? The reality of it is that if one of you doesn't like it, I'm not going to do it. Right? I'm not going to, if you're saying, hey, it's okay, you can coach me and coach them at the same time, I'm cool with it. But the other one goes, I don't feel that good about it. Okay, I'm not doing it. We're going to find 2 different coaches.
Mm-hmm.
So.
And if they both agree with you being there,
then I lay out expectations.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna tell them game plans unless they're okay with talking about it. But I'll say, hey, look, this is where potentially this person's going to be, and this is where you're going to be, and because one's most likely, unless they're truly neck and neck, more often than not, one is ahead of the other in some situations, and it's like this could happen and this could happen, and even then, I might even get to the point where I'm like, I'm not going to play games. You're going to put the best number on the bar.
Yeah.
Like limit lift, no missing. What is the number? Type deal. That's what I'm going to put on the bar.
Yeah, got it.
So that way they both have the best meat that they possibly can, and then the placing is just a byproduct of that.
Do you feel like you prefer them to be well informed before the competition?
Yes.
About the prognosis and the numbers everyone is going to try and hit?
Sure. Yeah, I think. Unless again, a conversation goes a long way, right? If I have a lifter and they want to know what's going on, I'm going to ask the other lifter if they're okay with sharing that information.
Uh-huh.
It is a coaching experience for 2 different lifters. So for me, if one is not comfortable with something, I'm not going to do it.
Yeah.
My goal is for them to feel like they are
locked up,
supported fully. And I think that every lifter will understand, why if someone says, I don't feel comfortable giving out my game plan, okay. And they're my competition. I know you're going to coach us both. It's not a big deal, but I really don't want them knowing my stuff. Okay, that's fine. I won't do it. So it's really that simple for me to say, okay, we're good. We're gonna. I can tell you this is what I would do. This is I'm gonna put the best numbers on the bar, and you guys are gonna fight it out. And wherever it lands, it lands. I'm not gonna sit there and do game change, attempt changes, things like that. I'm not gonna do any of that stuff on either of you. You're gonna put your best and finals in, and where you pull is where you pull. But I will say that if there's a competitive, some other lifters that are competitive, I will have to look at the at the big picture and say, okay, what is your goal for the meet? Is it getting first place, or is it getting second place or third place or what have you? Because if it comes down to something like money or something like that, you're like, look, I want to walk away with some cash. Mm-hmm. Okay, well, here you might have to. I'll play the game against others, but I'm not going to play a game against them. So wherever it lands as the day of happens, and you're 5 kilos back and 5 kilos extra on the deadlift, on the third deadlift is going to make you miss, and you're going to be out of the money because someone else catches you. Well, I'm not going to let that happen. We're going to concede to your teammate so that you can make sure that you stay in the money. Type deal.
Yeah, got it.
So again, it's contextual, but I think a conversation is needed to be had well ahead of time.
Okay, so jumping up to this question number 6. You're well known, quote unquote, as a coach of coaches because you coach well-known coaches like Marcellus and Steve and Sean. Do you feel more comfortable coaching coaches, highly qualified coaches, than average lifters? In a way that you feel you can be more creative, or you can investigate more through programming if the other person is a highly qualified coach?
I would say I don't feel any different. To me, it's like kind of like a conversation we were having a little bit before the call was talking about like mentorship and stuff like that. And to me, like, I want to put the best coaching product I can. So whether they are a high-level coach, a high-level lifter, intermediate lifter, newbie lifter, it doesn't matter, right? Because everybody's experience is still, we're all humans here, and they want to be supported and they want to reach their goals and all of that. So at the end of the day, I don't really label that in a way. I will say in some instances, a coach that I think gives, good feedback, right? But again, as a coach, if I'm not getting good feedback from someone, I need to educate them on how to give me good feedback.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense? Yeah, that's it, like that's my job, because if I'm coaching up someone, that's my job to teach them, hey, this is what I need from you.
Yeah.
Right. So if it's easier for I get my feedback from everybody, and coaches know what to give, right? They just do, because they do it on a day-to-day basis. But I don't see a real difference in the way that I approach things, basically.
So right? I guess you expect a high level of understanding of what's going on in programming, etc. from every
they might have some ideas. Yeah, they have ideas and things like that for sure. But I don't. At the end of the day, though, like, I still want to give them the same. Like, I still want to provide the same level of my analytical abilities. I'm not saying I'm pushing their thoughts and concerns aside or anything like that. I still apply the same level of, approach to each lifter, basically.
So I just came up with a random question I want to make.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Who you think will hit the biggest total in the 83s next year?
Oh, good question. Next year or at
next year?
You mean like Sheffield or something?
I don't know if Sheffield will have them all, because I see a potential damage in Chanoriera too. So sometimes.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. There's a lot of good lifters. Obviously, some stuff is hidden to a sense. Bornstein obviously has had a massive surge, with the guys at Sheffield with Tim and all them. Like, Tim's gaining weight. Russ coming in after feeling from Worlds and things like that. I think he's going to be ultra motivated and ready to push things to that level.
Delaney almost hit like
Delaney looks great. Honestly, I think
we'll see 900 in the 83s for sure.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
That's some pressure on the 93s for sure.
Oh, absolutely. The 93, some of these guys, the way they're weighing, could almost go 93 and do some damage in that class.
Yeah, actually.
And I think we've seen that too, because a year ago with Perk was a 74 knocking on the door of an 83 number win.
Yeah.
And then 83 started kind of bumping up, and then I think you're seeing this, like, this, I don't call it bottoms up, but you're seeing these these couple classes near each other, and these lifters, and they're kind of like pushing the envelope on themselves, or on the next class up, so to speak, because a lot of these guys, like, they're all weight cutting. So at any one point, if lifter goes, I don't feel like weight cutting anymore, I'm coming up, right? And you saw that with Taylor, right?
Yeah, too.
Right. So Taylor's going 83, and with his performance at Scary Strong there, that's
he had
right there.
He had probably
knocking on the
more than 850 on the day or something.
Yeah, I don't know what they had in plan, but he definitely had some kilos there to take. So, yeah, it's definitely going to be a very fun class to watch.
What's your name then?
What's that?
The name? Who will hit the biggest total? You have to put.
Be honest,
you have to put your money on him.
I don't know. I think I'm gonna need to see them perform.
Yeah.
Right. Obviously, we have training totals right now for a lot of things.
We've seen Joe perform.
I mean, Joe had junior Nats, and did he go to Worlds? Right? No.
No. He couldn't.
That's right.
He went to rally.
Yes, that's right. I want to see it. I want to see it on a stage where they're all, where they're there. Obviously, we're gonna get a smaller, like a sub, the population at Sheffield with was there 4? Tim, Ross, Endurance. Yeah, 4 of them.
Yeah.
Right. And then we're going to have PA Nats, which is going to be a battle. Assuming Russ doesn't compete at it because his total will be carried. You're going to see PA Nats. You're going to have Bornstein and Delaney. You have Juice Gruden. You have Sean. You have Angelo. You have Chris Perez.
Chris Perez too.
Yeah. So there's quite a few that we'll see at PA Nats. We'll see who comes out there. And then you're going to go right back into that battle in June in Germany there. So
it's a little bit sad that we can see like a real battle between the 10 or 12 best of the 8-3s.
In a weird way, and I know it's not possible, but I would love to see, because obviously there's a few in the U.S. that can really challenge. And depending on the day, right? Someone could have a good day, someone could have a bad day. I'd love to see it to where they're all on the stage, with Jurgens and with everybody from the international, just internationally, like have a full class like that. And I don't think we're obviously selected once PA Nats is going to send 1 or possibly 2 to Worlds, but I'd love to see it to where it was like all of them on one stage. That'd be really cool. Just because I think there's so many that are right there at that point right now. So it's gonna be a good class.
You didn't give me a name. You don't put your money.
I don't know enough about. Obviously, Bornstein is the one that's most recent right now with the. With what he had, 885 or something, 885 in training.
880, I think.
880, right? So, obviously his training is looking very good right now. Other guys are getting ready for Sheffield. So, once I see Sheffield, I kind of get a good idea of where everybody's at. But
885, he hit 215 on the bench.
Yep. Yeah. So, if I have to go, I guess, I'd probably go Bornstein just because of how
at this moment
younger,
and the progress he's making, like
the rate of progress is insane. Yeah,
that's ridiculous. Yeah,
Delaney's looks really good too. Delaney's been getting really strong.
Yeah, in the deadlifts. Yeah.
Obviously, Deuce doesn't post. I don't know any, from that standpoint. Taylor. Keeps a lot of his training under wraps for a little bit. Obviously, we saw the performance. So, I'd probably just go with Bornstein, to be honest, for right now. I think Delaney's going to give him a really good battle at PA Nats. See how Russ, with Russ coming back, like he's fired up from the Worlds, how the Worlds went. So, it'd be a good, it's going to be good, for sure.
So we're done for today.
You sure you didn't want to? You want to talk about burnout?
Yeah, it's a topic. I don't know if you there in the US tend to talk about it. Here in Spain, we've talked a lot about burnout,
Sure.
and I have a little bit of burnout of talking about burnout.
Sure.
But no, I want to know. I want to know your
Yeah.
thoughts.
Absolutely. So
How do we prevent?
So for me, like burnout is, I see it a lot. I think I tend to see it more so after Raw Nats, around that time frame. It almost to the point where I wonder if Raw Nationals for USAPL at the end of the year is kind of the issue.
Mm-hmm.
Where like maybe at the beginning of the year, kind of like how PA does it, where PA is going to go into Worlds, or you're going to go into this full competition season.
Because you have Raw Nationals once a year.
Correct.
And that's like the biggest one. You don't have an equal.
100%. There's no Worlds after that. Correct. They're the Pro Series finals. I think people view the idea was to view the Arnold as like the Worlds, so to speak. But I think a lot of lifters too, they spend this entire year through the summer months and things like that training for Raw Nationals or competing to qualify and then training whatever, that they get burnt out. And I'll say this, I think that burnout is a culmination of almost not, it's like being prepared for what's after, right? So like you go into the prep, you hit your numbers or you don't hit your number, whatever, and you come out of prep and you're like, I don't have that motivation and drive to do it. And my take with that is that's fine. That's honestly normal in a lot of sport aspects, right? That's why bodybuilders will do 3 and 4 shows together because they have to kind of stack them together because they're not going to be like that for a full year. They're going to do it for whatever, 6 months, 4 months or whatever, and they'll stack a bunch of shows together because they're in that shape. So we can't do that as powerlifters because it's pretty taxing. However, my take with that is that being prepared for what's after. And what that means is if you don't want to necessarily powerlift, that's okay. I've seen lifters go to bodybuilding routines and push-pull legs and whatever and come out of it and actually feel stronger and healthier because they mentally took the break for themselves to go and put training on a back burner, so to speak. It doesn't mean that you're not doing it because habits are going to win over motivation 10 out of 10 times, right? So those days that you don't want to go to the gym and you go and you do your job and you feel a lot better from it. Even though you don't really care for expectations, I don't care if I'm going to hit a big number today, but I'm just going to go and get this stuff done and get out of there, right? And some lifters need that coming out of their preps because they put so much mental effort and indulge so much to get to that point, right? Even if they're, intermediate lifters or whatever, they're still going to probably experience it at some point or another. I would even say as coaches, we kind of feel it because like at the end of the year, we're like, around this time, it's like, okay, well, meets are starting to slow down or competitions are slowing down. No one's competing around the holidays and this, that, and the other. And, even then we'll lose some clients to holiday things and stuff like that because of life stuff or whatever. And it's like, okay, it kind of feels like this lull in powerlifting, right? And then we kind of kick off the new year with Sheffield and PA and Arnold and all this other stuff, and then it kind of gets the ball rolling for the year. But by the time we get to the end of the year, it's kind of like meh. Now it depends. It depends on the country's schedule, right? That could be influenced differently, right? That could be a number of things. But that being said, I'm a big fan of look, I don't care if you don't powerlift. I'll write you whatever you want me to write. It doesn't matter. Principles are principles at this point.
Mm-hmm.
But that being said, all I ask is that someone trains.
Yeah.
And they train for themselves to feel good because their future self will thank them for it.
Yeah.
Because if you don't, and you're like, I don't want to, you're training or whatever, you're completely burnt out, and you don't even want to go to the gym, well, now you're detraining pretty hard, right? And it's going to feel like a longer comeback to get there, right? And so my take with that is just have a plan ready to go for after. If you're someone that experiences burnout, you're going to burn out, right? You know what it feels like. you just feel unmotivated, you're kind of like lackadaisical, whatever. Just have a plan ready for you, right? Just say, look, no more expectations. I don't care what I hit. Just go to the gym and do what you need to do, right? Go hit dumbbell bench press for all of your pressing stuff if you want to. Bench press twice a week if you want to, or once a week if you care. It doesn't matter. Just go to the gym.
Yeah.
Just go do something for yourself, because it is a good, healthy habit to have. And the people that do really well, that are driven more so on the habit and love just going to the gym for themselves, I tend to find are a lot more motivated in general, because they're not going to see some of those ebbs and flows. We have a lot of lifters that come into the sport and they love powerlifting.
Yeah.
But they never had that growth in the gym of like,
yeah,
hey, I did the, put legs, push, pull.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like how you first started in the gym, and they accelerate all the way to powerlifting, and then they're on this idea that numbers are all that matters. And it's like, no, just go get you a good pump. Like go feel good. Like walk around with your quads all pumped up from a 3x15 or 4x20 leg extension or something like that. You know what I mean? Like it's a feeling that I think drives that like feel good feeling about the gym versus this negative feeling about the gym.
Yeah.
Which is the burnout.
Maybe it is easier for our gym. I am 29. I'm kind of old in the powerlifting thing because we have a lot of kids at 20, 21, 19,
sure.
18. I know I can do this for up until I'm 50 or 45, because before powerlifting, I already loved training and just going to the gym. But a lot of kids get to powerlifting before having trained or before understanding what it is to feel good when training.
Correct. That's a big.
That's a big change.
That's a big thing.
So that's a big change in the game.
Yeah, and that's huge, because you have a base of like habits and like good feelings about the gym that are important, right? That like create this idea that you're going to go to the gym and do it no matter what.
Yeah.
Depending if you're a power lifter, you're a bodybuilder, or somewhere in the middle. Hell, you could be a hybrid athlete. I don't care, right? But like you're there because you want to do something. So that transition from one discipline to another is fine, right? And it's healthy for for you to pivot and transition and be like, look, I don't, I've got a lot of going on with coaching or XYZ. These athletes, like I can kind of take this time to chill, and then I can kind of push back into it, but I'm still going to be in the gym doing what I need to do. And that's a good sense of way of combating the burnout, right? Versus, yes, younger lifters, they get in, powerlifting, big numbers, I want to get to worlds, right?
Yeah.
And like they get there, they have all these, right, as powerlifters, we have those hard sessions where you're like, oh, I don't get my number, and it makes us feel like crap. Right? And then all of a sudden, their mood changes, the gym sucks, they're getting frustrated, and you have to kind of battle through it as a coach, or they've got to battle through it as a lifter. And, you get to the finish line, like, oh gosh, I'm just so burned out.
Even when the numbers are there, sometimes there's a downfall too. Right? Yep. After the competition or even a great competition, you have a downfall too.
Absolutely. So I think, like I said, having that like pure love to just
training.
I don't even want to say train, because train insinuates that they're getting ready for something.
Yeah.
I'm going to say it as pure love of working out.
Yeah.
Exercising, in a sense. If they can get that, I think that the aspect of burnout doesn't become burnout. It becomes, I'm going to pivot and do this. Right?
You're protected.
Yeah, and it's not so, the gym doesn't become so negative in a way. It becomes like, because here's what ends up happening. When someone burns out, it's usually a few months. They get frustrated that, they kind of half in, half out powerlifting. They don't care. They go to the gym, they screw around, blah, blah, blah. They don't feel good. Then they go and help someone at a competition, right? They show up at a comp, and they're watching one of their friends, or they see people in their gym getting ready to train to compete, and all of a sudden the fire lights.
Yeah.
And they get that urge back. Well, in that intermediary time, if there is some level of, I don't call it structure, but maybe a structured like workout protocol that they were doing that was still allowing them to build muscle in different ways other than powerlifting, I think that they would get off on the right foot going into that next motivational phase that they have. Right?
Yeah, totally agree.
Like, to me, like, I can't understand. I'm not going to totally understand it, but like, I love training. I love like lifting, right? So I'm going to be in the gym no matter what, whether I'm powerlifting or not. And so that's just how it's going to be. So when a lifter's like, I don't feel like going, I understand. I've also had instances like that. I had that after having one of my having my hip surgeries and not feeling like I could do anything, and it was frustrating. I didn't want to screw around on leg extension and leg curl for every lower body session when that was my favorite thing to do. I got it. I get it. And I would go to the gym, I'd sit on my ass, and I'd do a couple things, and I'd walk out, and I feel like I didn't do anything. I didn't love that feeling, and I regret that feeling now, knowing that I could have done so much more, because the second we start telling ourselves that we can't do something, it happens. Yeah. Like it's a dangerous, it's a slippery slope.
Yeah, we've all been there.
Like, they can do something. Go leg press, go hack squat, do leg extension, leg curls, do dumbbell bench. I don't care. Do something. Right? And so now, like, anytime I'm like hurt or, I don't feel motivated, like, just go to the gym and get there and do something. Start on one. Don't even have a plan. Just be like, I'm going to do chest today. Or I'm going to do back today. I'm just going to pick an exercise that looks fun, and I'm going to start doing it. And by that point, now I'm going to get the ball rolling, and I'm going to get to a good workout through there. So when you don't feel like you need structure, those are some, you might not necessarily be, I want to do dumbbell bench for a 3x10 today at 8 RPE. I need to get to this number. Like, don't think with that mindset. Just go in, get your 3x10 at 8 RPE. Whatever it is whatever it is. Or if you're like, hey, I don't feel like doing it, go do your dumbbell, do a barbell flat bench or a barbell incline. Do something. Pick something that seems enjoyable to you. Because I'd rather somebody do that than do nothing. Or to, bullshit their way through a workout and they feel like they didn't do anything.
And when you are used to a training split, a demanding training split in powerlifting, and all of a sudden you stop training, it feels horrible. Like horrible for everyone. No one feels better.
I mean, you see it a lot with injuries too, and it's very, I haven't heard it yet, but like Natalie Richards just talked about her injury and having to kind of like quote unquote, having to work through that, and it feels like taking a break, and it is a weird feeling to go to the gym and be like, I want to be there doing what I love,
but I can't.
But I can't, or every time I do something, something happens, and I walk out of the gym feeling defeated. It's a terrible feeling.
Yeah.
And so being able to have those, like, self-talk or just a coach to tell, hey, look, this is what we're going to do. Whether it's injury, burnout, whatever, like, this is what we're going to do. And sometimes it's giving a lot of, like, just more external support to the lifter and say, hey, look, I'm not going to give you an exercise. Just go pick something that you want to do and tell me what you did. And, like, we'll figure it out from there. Because those periods of time are also relatively the hardest. And it's more so just, like, I'm more encouraging the habit than I'm encouraging them to, like, be at their peak performance. So
I think the habit is the key somehow. Not losing it.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, that's pretty much the bulk of it. To get them to that point. So, yeah, I mean, like I said, their future self will thank them, and I think also it just drives the idea of habits over motivation, which is everybody in every motivational quote will tell you that stuff. That, but it's true. I mean, it is like
So now, yes, we're good to go.
Awesome.
Thanks a lot for coming, Brad.
Yeah, appreciate it. Thank you for having me on.
Bye.
All right, see ya.